Welcome back to the Wanderer's Library, Wanderer. I hope that you've had a nice week out there. Since you've come back so soon, you make your way to Library Wing 1, the Hidden Nest, and over to the first shelf, King Shash's shelf. The next book that catches your eye seems to be a paper that was once folded in the shape of a bird. Following the paper trail. It all starts with a single piece of paper, reading a single name, followed by a string of characters. Klein Opkel. 2E 44A 52A C1972F BB8 62466 EB1DOB. The worker repeated out loud before folding the piece into the shape of a bird. Or so they had been told, not like they could know for certain. Letting it fly into the dusty sky. Its yellowed wings flapped fast, moving towards the northeast. The worker thus followed after the avian trinket. This has been their job since their inception. Receive a name, turn it into a guide, and follow it through the maze of records, looking for, well, a record. It is said that when a soul disappears, it still leaves something behind. Here, that something was a single sheet of paper detailing information of some kind. The worker wasn't sure what that information was about, for they didn't bother reading any of the papers they fetched. That information wasn't meant for them, but rather for someone, probably. They weren't aware of the finer details of the job, but they knew it was important. If it weren't, it wouldn't be this difficult. After several cycles of walking through the filing cabinets that comprised the floor, walls, and roof of the newer facilities, they noticed the paper bird was flying in circles over one of the older places. The voids of lost wisdom. Gigantic sinkholes of paper, where almost all records rested, buried until their retrieval was asked of them. The worker whistled. The paper bird diving into the sinkhole, the worker jumping after it. They knew not what death felt like, but swimming into a sinkhole, lost in the darkness of the sea of paper cuts, was scary, and thus it was most likely akin to dying. That's how they had heard dying was like, from the few souls they had the pleasure of meeting. After a time inside the void that felt like an eternity, during which they could hear nothing but the crumbling of millions of paper sheets and see nothing but the shine of the paper bird they were following after, they reached the bottom. A bottom, at the very least. Some workers spoke of older times, where the sinkholes were deeper below, and the current sinkholes were the places they called offices and homes. Times where all papers would be filed in the usual system, instead of dropping by the millions into the ground, forming immense piles. Then they would run out of space. Whenever it happened, they would begin building upwards. These new heights would become a new place to work in, and the previous one would be filled to the brim with the papers they couldn't file during the building period. They had asked these older workers why they did things this way, and they always responded the same way. This is how it's always been. As far as they knew, this cycle was a natural part of their realm. Of this part of the realm, at least, for they had heard not everywhere was like this. Past the towers of manifolds, there were rivers of ink and mountains of wood and castles and basements, and many other such constructs. What their purpose was, they didn't know. Their knowledge of it didn't affect their job anyway. The bird slowly unfolded into a sheet again, passing through a filing cabinet. The worker grabbed the rusty handle and pushed. It barely moved. They tried again, getting the drawer out, pieces of the spring that's supposed to keep it in place jumping around. loose. Tons of paper began being sucked into the hole they had made, the worker among the parchments. Another scary moment, but the worker barely noticed. This was part of their job after all. A rather common part as well. Getting up and removing several of the papers stuck to their body, they kept following after the bird, which had folded itself again into its previous shape, jumping around, looking left and right before navigating through the building. This was the easy part, which allowed the worker to take a short break, sitting down on a collapsed cabinet, watching as the floor slowly began filling with paper they had let in. This would make finding information here more difficult in the future, but it was quite rare that they needed to explore the same areas again. That might become a problem in 1,000 cycles. Oh well. Finally, the bird chirps, the single sound these constructs make, the worker getting up and walking to where it was. The bird had a single sheet of paper on its beak. The worker took it, and immediately after, the bird exploded into bits of confetti paper. Thanks for your service. The worker pulled out a brown-colored envelope, putting the file in. Without a second of hesitation, they made their way back to the cabinet hole they had left, jumping through it, swimming against the bureaucratic current. After a few moments, they were free of the pull. Finally, their scavenger hunt was over, and they were ready to go home. The return took about the same amount of cycles as their departure. Once back in the offices, they met the paper effigy, a massive creature made up of thousands of workers that moved as a single one. This was the entity that assigned every worker in this part of the realm the bird guides needed to complete their work. Klein Opkel 2E44852AC19726FBB862466EB1DOB. The worker read the name on the folder before presenting it to the effigy. The Goliath stared at the worker with hundreds of judgmental eyes before stretching out a limb. The worker at the end of it grabbing the paper before inserting it into a cylindrical capsule, dropping it inside a pipe system that sent the file wherever it needed to be. Here is your next job, the effigy spoke, the voices of all the automatons that composed it harmonizing together before grabbing the topmost paper off the hundreds of towers that surrounded them. Each one a job yet to fulfill. The worker accepts it before looking at it. It contains a single name, followed by a string of characters. Allison War. 2E44852AC1972FBB862466EA8329. The worker repeated out loud before folding the piece into the shape of a bird. The bird flew southeast. The worker followed. After finishing following the paper trail, and becoming a little more knowledgeable on the types of things that happen after people's deaths, another book catches your eye. Seems to be some kind of paper, written by someone from Are We Cool Yet? The Exhibition. I had never been so disappointed before. Tonight was supposed to be my big night. The Anart exhibition that would define my career, hosted by the richest men of the anomalous world, Marshall, Carter, and Dark. Luminaries from all across the multiverse had come to see our work. I remember how surprised and excited I was to see the letter that I had even been accepted into the exhibition. To receive one of these had been my dream since I was a child, learning all about the wonders of the anomalous on my father's knee. The letter looked so formal, with the logo of MC&D printed at the bottom, that I thought it sealed my future forever. I spent 5 hours fretting beforehand. Eventually, I settled on a suit to wear. A black and white chessboard pattern, only with actual chess pieces that moved and played games over the fabric. I had specifically requested that it be made with Some of the most famous games of history soon onto it, but when I looked down at myself, I could not tell which game was which. Before I could second-guess my choice of clothing, I looked at the time and realized I was running slightly late and left in a hurry, rushing to the portal that the letter had told me to go to, in between a bookshop and a bowling alley. When I arrived, my astonishment at seeing the place was a feeling I would never forget. It was ridiculously surreal, like if M.C. Escher painted an art museum, and the museum was filled with Escher's paintings, with the paintings themselves being alive. The chandeliers were made from glowing crystals, almost looking more like disco balls than chandeliers. The crowd there was as impressive as the art, with all sorts of people from all sorts of dimensions, dressed in the finest suits, capes, and cloaks that money could buy. As I approached the host, a tall, imposing figure with gray robes, a metal mask, and a mane of white hair, I felt very intimidated. Yes, yes. I've been awaiting your arrival, Natura, he was saying to the woman before him. A human with a green dress that I quickly noticed was actually made of leaves, and dark green hair to match flowing down past her shoulders, with flowers in her hair and clothes. Your work is waiting for you in the West Wing. The woman, who I assumed was named Natura, eagerly nodded and looked over to her right. She started walking so quickly she almost bumped into me. Whoa, she said suddenly, stopping herself. Sorry about that. No, it's all right, I said awkwardly. Just gonna go talk to the host, find where they put my work. I'll casually flex that, why not? I thought to myself. Oh, you're an artist as well? She asked. Yeah, I grinned. Artifacts. I held out my hand. Natura. She shook it. Anyway, I'd better go. Good luck. She started to leave. And don't forget, look how lucky we are. We made it! With one last smile, she ran off. Happy for her and worried for myself, I approached the host. Hello? I introduced myself. My name's Artifacts. I'm one of the artists here. Oh, yes, he said in what almost sounded like a metallic voice echoing through my ears. Artifacts. Your work is in the East Wing. It's in the far left corner. Can't miss it if you look for it. As disappointed as I was that I would not be with the Natura for the exhibition, I was more worried about what he meant by if you look for it. Thank you. I awkwardly nodded and then hurried off. As it turned out, I had every reason to worry. When I got to my display and looked around, my work was put in a small corner of the museum, getting very little attention from the people, except for those who had grown tired of hobnobbing with the rich and powerful, and needed a place to relax for 15 minutes before heading back into the fray. My, isn't this quaint? One particular gallery goer had said. A tall, thin man with a soft smile, but a hard, impervious gaze. I'll certainly see something like that painting in the commemorative plate one day. Mark my words. If by that you mean it will be widely distributed and beloved by many, then yes, perhaps you are right, I sneered back, but it fell as flat as the man merely smirked and walked away. I was in such a bad mood that I was beginning to contemplate packing up my stuff and leaving when someone came up to me. Excuse me, came a jittery voice from behind me, and I turned to see a bespectacled man in a cheap gray suit holding a clipboard. Oh, hello there. I rolled my eyes. Come to catalog my stuff, have you? See if it fits your price range as a Christmas present. What? He tilted his head in confusion. No, don't be silly. I represent the hosts of the exhibition this evening, Marshall, Carter, and Dart. You represent... My head quickly swelled with optimism. Oh, well, good heavens! It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, sir. I reached out and shook his hand, even though it was not offered. May I have your name? That's not important, sir. The man looked down at his clipboard. Oh, I was not in the mood for cryptic stuff. Can I call you Bob then? I joked. If you like, he shrugged. You're our artifacts, yes? Yes, indeed, I grinned. The foremost up-and-coming artist of the Are We Cool Yet movement. As you say, sir. He did not look up from his clipboard. Have you been enjoying the exhibition? Oh, it's been wonderful, I lied. Glad to hear it, Bob replied flatly. Now about your work, artifacts. Ah, yes, I grinned again. Have your employers, taken an interest? Well, it's just that... Bob looked up with an apologetic smile. That's not a good sign, I thought to myself, worried. Surely this isn't your best work, sir. What do you mean by that? I flared up. Take a look at this one, for instance. I pointed him towards my painting on the wall, picturing a beautiful woman who I now noticed bore an eerie resemblance to Natura, sitting in the middle of a meadow at night. If you gaze at this painting for too long, soon enough you will fall irreversibly in love with her. No way to reverse the process as far as my experiments have concluded. You're telling me that counts for nothing? Oh, artifacts, Bob shook his head. You and I both know that people like the Foundation and the Coalition could easily cure an affliction like that. Besides, not exactly hard-hitting, is it? A painting that makes one fall in love? Well, I began. I mean, no, it's quite tame, it's quite modest, I corrected myself. But what about this? I gestured to a vase sitting on the table, one ordained with beautiful carvings around it and a bunch of dead flowers within it. This vase will kill anything you put in it. These flowers, dead. Put your hand in, it dies. I even put a mouse in there, and guess what? It, died. Precisely! I raised my arms. A vase that kills things. Bob looked at his clipboard. Frankly, it's even simpler than the last one. You know, this is an exhibition for Anart, right? You might do well to get out of the reach of the anomalous and... No! I shouted suddenly. No, I mean, what about this? In desperation, I pointed to a small sculpture next to the vase of an ancient Greek archer striking a pose, ready to loose an arrow. Bob looked down at it. Oh, yes, that. What about it? Well, I began nervously. The eyes follow you wherever you go. Could it shoot you? Are you willing to test that? My voice faltered. Oh, artifacts. Bob shook his head. I'm afraid it just isn't up to the standards of my employers. You know you were only invited here because of the connections your father has. But now I'm starting to doubt if strings can be pulled for you anymore. He started to walk away. Disappointing. Oh, wait! Don't go! I called after him, but he kept walking. I've got more! It was too late. He had disappeared into the crowd. As I lost sight of him, I sighed to myself, resigning myself to disappointment. Father is going to be so disappointed. When I started walking back to my display, I heard a familiar voice behind me. How did you fare? I turned around. It was Natura. Oh, fine, I guess. I lied. You guess? She raised an eyebrow at me. This was fantastic. All night, everyone was coming up to me asking about my work. Some guy almost got eaten. I assume he wasn't expecting the flytrap painting to be so lifelike. It was incredible. Well, that was a good start, I guess. I shrugged nervously. I've got to head off. I think I'll pack my stuff up and go. I glanced back and forth from my display to her. Nice meeting you. I concluded and walked off. Yeah, real smooth, I reflected sarcastically. Nice to meet you, too, she called after me. As I began to pack up my work, taking the painting off the wall, the buzz of the exhibition seemed to die down, and all I could hear were my own thoughts. Just not good enough artifacts. I'll do better next time. I have to. After having read about Artifacts' immense disappointment, the next book catches your eye. It appears to be written in some kind of old parchment, and the smell of the sea rises off of it. The 12th of Aether. If you take the time to pay attention to various vendors of little trinkets along shores, something may catch your eye. Lustrous shells with inked patterns, perhaps even embossed. The peddler might insist they're genuine ink ivory, caught in the nearby shores, and will ask for an obscenely high price. If you go to one of the Nexus's dens, called by most the library, among the clay tablets of Apadalon and the carvings of Mika, somewhere at the bottom of the drawer, you'd find something similar to ink ivory, but much greater in size. Most would overlook it, mistaking it for some decoration. I doubt that you would see the fractal patterns of history inlaid there, and that you'd understand why it's earned its place there. Those are relics of seabed critters. They are uncountable colonies of ink crabs, which are rife near settled shores or shipwrecks. I had the luck of seeing some living colonies. They feed on culture, on the history and traditions and the small customs of those who inhabit the land. While the colonies that survive today swarm chaotically, like Pierre herself, the remains that enfold the seabed with dainty stay proof to the countless generations before them. A few weeks after I met Cleeks, a lovely Snindi folk I came to know during my sales, she introduced me to a wonderful individual, Grandpa Claus. Cleeks enjoys giving nicknames to most of the people she meets, often to their dismay. She took care of him since she found him. She found him buried in some rubble, looking for bluebells. Despite his timeless appearance, I found out that he is only a few centuries old. He is of odd circumstances. He got forsaken by his colony in some forsaken place, but didn't die from the lack of civilization. In the first years, he found this strange as well. Then, his shell began to emboss itself, not with any of the dull patterns hundreds of young crabs often get before maturity, but sweet and enchanting geometries, full of dance and laughter. After a few decades, the abstract shapes started to entwine, turning his shell into a canvas. Ink crabs, I've been told, never see the landlubbers. Most of them live at that blurry boundary between sentience and sapience, only beginning to understand their own nature at about a dozen decades. But almost none live so long, from what I've seen. The empty shells on the sea bottom are only a few inches wide, with a sad little pattern. Of course, many of them in one place would make a great depiction of the changing aeons, but never alone. However, Claus was familiar with the settlement that nurtured him. I was lucky, he said to me while recounting the intricate seismic calendar. My people are gifted. They had an amazing system for predicting earthquakes, and, for the first time since I'd come to this world, no mention of gods. The system had its faults, but it never failed in predicting a dangerous earthquake. They found me when I was still crawling in the crevice. The embossment on his shell, despite being as smooth as any other crab's shell, had something strange about them. I thought that was it. when I saw the sharp metal in their hands. It was somewhat reminiscent of Scrimshaw. But then I was still young. I still don't know a knife from a chisel. Mentio was a flourishing metropolis. They knew the waters and the stones. It wasn't enough, though. Perhaps if they knew of the ways, the nexuses, their scholars were the best in 1,000 miles. But in 1,000 miles there was no other village or city. A few years ago, the city was shaken. And I think the people crying desperately for something to save them from the slight inconvenience of a false prediction. A single digit missed after the radix point was enough. I hope I'll go back. Then Keelix gently took me aside and chided me for bringing the caverns up. When I asked why, she told me that Mentia won't be any time soon. Having read about Klaus, the orphaned ink crab, you spot something out of the corner of your eye. A loose piece of paper, and it seems familiar. You're sure you read something from him before, so why not read this one too? 81st turn, 7th year, 16th cycle. Tronde. From the Journal of Aphrimos Longjourney, Pilgrim, with notes by Avos Tor, scholar of Reeve Library. Tronde. 16th cycle, 7th year, 81st turn. 26th day in the trees. Today, we found a body. I needed to relieve myself, and so had taken myself off the path for a moment. While I was doing so, I saw something trailing from behind a nearby tree. It was an arm. I finished what I was doing and called to Tron. We rounded the tree and saw the arm's owner had died. He had not been dead for too long, perhaps less than a day. The scavengers hadn't yet touched the body. He had been taller than Torn, but shorter than me, and covered with thick, brown, ropey hair. The face was that of a horse, and he had been a slave. The chains were still attached to his wrists and ankles. Sadly, few slaves managed to escape from the trading company. His clothing was more ragged than my own. He was dirty, filthy, and probably had been starving. He had nothing but a rusted knife. There were no wounds on his body. Torn is fairly sure he died from starvation or exposure. He was very thin. Yet on the trees he was leaning against, he had taken the time to carve a single word. Free. Get those chains off his wrists, for pity's sake, Torn said. I looked at his face, and he looked more serious than I had seen him before. There was no joke on his lips, nor laughter in his eyes. His voice was strained, as though he had trouble getting the words out. I did as he asked, using the tools my first father gave me. Torn threw the chains as far away as he could, as though they were cursed. Then we buried the poor soul at the base of the tree, letting it serve as his headstone. We do not keep slaves, the Barrow. Nor do any of our neighbors, but we know about slavery. The caravans come through, and sometimes they bring slaves from one part of the world to another. Sometimes we buy one or two, and let them free to return home. But there are so many, and it seems impossible that they should all be free one day. But we hope. I am sad for the one we buried. But he was free for a time. Let that be his epitaph. Free. Whoever you are, stranger, water on your journey and stars to guide your steps. You finish reading from the Journal of Apromus Long Journey and put the page back with the journal proper. Then you notice that there's something stamped with a symbol for the Wanderers Bureau of Investigation. It appears to be the readout from a terminal. WBI database. Beware. For there are monsters stuck in your head. Initializing library card reader. Please enter your library card. Identity confirmed. Initializing body and shape residue scanner. Do not change shape. Identity confirmed. Initializing mimetic voice recognition tool. Please say, "The unblinking owl winks at midnight," into the microphone. Identity confirmed. Initializing soul-bound ID concept scanner. Be rid of negative thoughts. Identity confirmation failed. The unblinking owl winks at midnight. 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 And the blind serpent bites back. Welcome back, Wanderer. For man, woman, monster, and mime deserve a safe library. Real identity. Real name. Darius Jack Henderson Dale. Real species, human, prime dimension, reality A6K. Real date of birth, prime dimension, reality A6K, born in Canada, Toronto, Toronto General Hospital. Real age, 43 human, A6K years. 0.00000000000000000982 library shifting cycles. Favorite book, A Loaf Story. Library card number 5009890784673. WBI position. Shelf Director AC198L, lower floors. Been in the Bureau for 7 human A6K years. 0.0071 shelf shifting cycles. Affiliations. Ex-jailer, human consult, under Library Investigation Department. Active cases. Dimensional destabilization spike in under library crypts. If any information in this section is incorrect, please visit your nearest Unreality Shifting Identity Center. You have new messages. Initializing harmful mimetic agents remover. Think of happy memories. No harmful media detected. Initializing psychospatial moles remover. Empty your mind. No moles detected. Initializing recipient sender verification tool. Do not turn off your brain-bound third eye device or disconnect it from the WBI database. No fraudulent sources detected. From. Are we cool yet? No, not cool yet. Sent with unidentified terminal. Sent on 0401921. WBI Human Standardized Time. Contents. Hey, the game you requested for isn't in stock yet. Sorry. Who even plays Dunk Hunt anymore? Man. Anyway. Yeah, stay cool and shit. Reply. Next message. From Serpent's Hand. Helen Jarvie Henderson, Dale. Message received from an untrusted sender. Contents will be sent to the WBI Administrative Department. Sent with Standard Intra-Library Net Human Computer. Sent on 3108-2021. Earth Time, Reality A6K. Contents. I'm sorry, Daryl. For all the things I said, I was scared. I'm a paranoid person, yeah? That's something we have in common. I'm sorry for all the things I did, too. I hope you know that They were never meant to hurt you. And the things I thought of you, because I'm horrible when it comes to knowing better. You're the oldest sibling, after all. I don't know what happens now, but I hope we can see each other again someday. G. Tame. Blocked. From the Administrative Department. WBI official. Sent with Third Eye device. Sent on 0501921. WBI Human Standardized Time. Contents. Hello, Dallas, and welcome to the Underlibrary Department. You've been the shelf director for the lower floors for 4 years now, so it would only be a matter of time, right? Wrong. We normally wouldn't have people like you here. Not even as shelf director. But that decision wasn't up to me. I'd cut my own 17 arms before I let a human handle the crypts. Let alone a jailer. You're here because you're the best at what you do. Or really, because someone out there with enough power thinks you're good enough. Even if what you do is neutralize and put everything you don't understand in boxes. As you already know, we've recently lost our connections with the Hand, and tensions with the librarians are at an ever-rising high. I'm sorry to hear what happened to your sister. By the way, cutting contact with the Hand is part of protocol, so I must remind you that you are forbidden from contacting her or the Hand. Luckily for you, we've got something to take your mind off it. This is probably the closest you'll ever be to putting things in boxes again. You've probably heard the rumors, and they're all probably true. There are things, dangerous things, looming in the dark below the library. Things that are alien even to me, you, and the librarians, who seem to not even want to acknowledge the existence of the crypts. There has been a recent spike in activity in transit. We have reason to believe malicious patrons and entities may have found their way underground and are messing the ever-so-delicate balance up. This is not something we plan on allowing, Darius. I'm sure you can understand why. Centuries ago, the brightest members of the Hand, the most knowledgeable of the bibliophiles, and the most reasonable of the magpies, came together with the sole purpose of making the library a safe place for all its patrons. All patrons willing to follow the rules, at least. The librarians were good at what they did. Too good, even. But their neutral stance on most things hurt the library greatly. We needed someone to oversee us. We needed someone to warn us of all of those dangerous places and all those dangerous people. We needed someone to keep track. Someone who didn't paint the news on their favor and focused only on profit. We needed someone who would help all those people unable to get back to their homes because of fear against the supernatural. Someone who didn't chicken out when things got complicated. We needed someone to answer all those unanswered questions, and someone who didn't do more harm than good in the process of getting the answers. So the WBI came together as one, and we left those old organizations behind. We kept diplomatic relations, but we would no longer be handled by people with personal interests. We've been making the library a safe place for long now, protecting those who need it, and persecuting those who deserve it. We will be keeping that, for monster, mime, woman, and man deserve a safe library. I've got my eye on you, Darius. Reply. From Sky High Department. Unnamed Worm, number 3901. Sent with WBI Standard Terminal. Sent on 077892. WBI Apreen Standardized Time. Contents. Hey man, Willie here. Congrats on the promotion. You gotta tell me all about the crypts. Specifically the confidential bit. Eyes. Nah, I'm kidding. But we should totally celebrate. You, the gang, and me at Plan to nash these wings tomorrow morning? Reply. Active case file. Initializing info hazard remover. Stand by. All info hazards removed. Initialize algorithmic false information disinformation remover. Yes, no. Yes is selected. Initializing algorithmically false information disinformation remover. Keep an open mind. All disinformation removed. Initializing recipient sender verification tool. Do not turn off your brain-bound third-eye device or disconnect it from the WBI database. No fraudulent sources detected. Initializing external spying parties scanner. Look behind your back. Stand by. No unauthorized parties detected. Project. Dimensional destabilization spike in under-library crypts. Area of interest 01. Stone crypts. Large area in the underground library crypts below floor -20. Believed to extend infinitely around the library and at least 200 floors down. The first 20 floors are the areas that get the most traffic, and where most careless patrons end up wandering to in dumb curiosity. Unidentified entities sometimes find their way up, but are quickly spotted and detained by librarians. This is by far the safest zone in the crypts. Librarians will advise patrons to leave, but no secondary measures will be taken. Books are scattered around in stone shelves. Some rooms are currently being occupied by small cults that have turned them into their headquarters or ritual rooms. See Children of the Blood Moon, Followers of Solomon. Floors below, -50, are more dangerous to traverse. The first reality tears and topological or geographical displacement happenings. Patrons that find themselves in shifting event while on floors are unlikely to ever find the exit, assuming one was left open. On screen is a picture of the stone crypts hallway C6678R. Area of interest 2. Forbidden shelves. Small hidden areas found in the stone crypts below floor -78. Bookshelves that not even the place that contains and shares all knowledge would want patrons reading. Be it ancient destructive thaumaturgy or reality-altering spells. You can probably find it here. The WBI is currently unaware of how these books are taken here. Some believe it to be the librarians doing, others the libraries, but nothing is certain. On screen is instance in floor -134, hidden behind stone shelf 89027K. Area is affected with a color-canceling phenomenon, type 3. Area of interest 03, the cellars. Found below floor -220, completely devoid of color, sound seems to be exacerbated greatly, with every footstep echoing through the next 6 hallways. These floors are filled with thousands of empty cells. The WBI believes that library rule breakers and dangerous creatures were taken here before the librarians had complete control of the ways, and the transmutation process was found. The place seems abandoned now, with the skeletons of the once prisoners remaining in their cells. Only the strongest horrors survive, and they're incredibly deadly, destroying all WBI drones that come near them and terminating agents, other patrons, and librarians are rarely ever seen here. Due to the sheer difficulty of going down all the previous floors. Not even the most determined of occult lovers come here, and as there are not many forbidden books to be found on this nightmare. Gods simply refrain. Being beacons of energy is a sure way to call attention, and they're not really positive they can neutralize some of the things that reside down here. On screen is pictured cellar hallway 6782IFG, floor -270. Floor is affected by color-canceling phenomenon type 10. Area of interest 04, the caves. Found below floor -500, the last floor on the map so far. That is not to say you can't keep going down, but we've decided not to categorize them as floors, as the cave systems intertwine and connect all sorts of ways. With no rhyme or reason, mapping has proven impossible as this part of the crypt seems to shift, even if slightly, by the day. Contrary to previous floors, no color anomaly seems to be present, but entities down here seem to be psychologically affected. It is unknown whether this is due to some property of the caves or just the individual's circumstances. Agents traveling down here, either physically or by advanced exploration with drones, have reported hearing their own voices echo throughout the cave, even if they haven't spoken a single word. Not much is known about the creatures that roam this realm, but we can only guess that if nothing else embraces coherency, the creatures living here do not either. On screen is pictured, "I didn't mean to. How could I have known?" Entities of Interest, 01. The Children of the Scarlet King. A group of individuals who have been seen roaming around all the way from upper crypt floors, floor -78, all the way to the cellars. It is believed they came from reality A6K, adoring an ancient immortal that is public enemy of the library, and summoning horrors of all kind in its name. The WBI assumes them to be responsible for many of the wayward creatures on the upper crypts and the angerment of some of cellar entities as well. Entities of Interest, 02. The Chaos Crypts. A splinter group of madmen from different realities that have forced their way into the library and fled to the stone crypts. The high influx of madmen, jailers, and book burners entering the library recently is believed to be their doing, as several ways have been found recently opened in the stone crypts, imperfect and dangerous to use, with the primitive technology that is characteristic of the madmen. Entities of Interest, 03. The Tentacle Society. A group of radical anti-humanoids that has been banned from most parts of the library. They're constantly seen roaming the cellars, creating small outposts and managing to open ways in these floors despite strong topological anomalies. The group has been seen collecting humanoid bodies of patrons that die in the crypt, though their intentions are unknown as the WBI still hasn't managed to find them in the act. There are rumors of necromancy, sacrifice to a divine being, or simply consuming them as food. Entities of Interest, 04. Old Pains. A dangerous entity roaming the cellars that has always seen by the observer as an old individual of their own species. Patrons over 300 years old that come in contact with the entity will always terminate themselves after believing that they are old enough and have lived a successful life. The entity has proven able to drive immortal gods to self-termination, and WBI interfaces after the observer and the entity have interacted has been thus far futile. Entities of Interest, 05. The Owl. The following entry is removed. He winks at midnight, and he roams the caves. He has left many times, yet he has left none, for he is trapped. He takes the form, voice, and memories of those near him, and he slaughters them. He then leaves, and lives in their lives to the end, craving to be finally free from the most of the caves. But he shall not get that freedom, for he is still in the cave. He will always be, even when he's outside, even when he's everywhere and nowhere. Having read what was written on those readouts, you suddenly have an inkling of a feeling that there are definitely things you don't want to know about in this library. Just being here is making you shiver a little bit. You decide that's where it ended today, and so, as your local librarian, I'd like to thank you for coming. It's been a joy having you, Wanderer, and I hope to see you again soon.